Hello, this is the assembly guide for the Thumper. The Thumper is a Mega XL and shotgun harmonica clip blaster. In order to find more information about the Thumper, please go to the GitHub link in the video description. This video is strictly just assembly of the Thumper. For more information about how the Thumper works, what sort of options there are for accessories for the Thumper, or troubleshooting or anything like that, that's all in the GitHub link below. So yeah, let's get right underway. Before we jump into the proper full assembly of the blaster, there are some things you need to pre-assemble if they come in split versions. So if you are printing on a smaller printer, you might have printed your top slide instead of one piece, which is this top one, in two pieces, which is down here. Same for the cam arm right here. If you have a reasonable sized printer, you can print this all in one big piece, but if you don't, you have two small pieces. So at this point, you want to assemble these split versions into the full component. So this part on the top slide just goes there, and then there are 4 screws. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the cam arm just has 2 screws in it. As you can see there, 2 screws. 1, 2. Just put those in, and then you are done with this step. Our first step of assembly is going to be the grip assembly right here. You can pretty easily see pretty much all that's going on here. There are 2 panels right here, these white bits, which sandwich the rest of the internals for the grip assembly inside of it. Let's go over how to assemble this so far. You will have a piece of elastic cord in your hardware kit. You're going to tie a knot on one end of it and poke it through this hole. So the knot will sit in there and make sure that it doesn't keep going all the way through the hole when you start pulling it out the top. This is the other end of that hole, so you can see it there. So you're going to want to tie a knot on this end of the cord and poke the rest of it through the grip. You will then tie the other end of it through the trigger and through the sear. This is the sear, this back bit here. So what you will be doing is taking your elastic cord with a knot on the end, pushing the non-knotted end of it through the bottom of the grip, through this hole in the trigger, and through this hole in the sear. You will then pull it until it's nice and taut. Make sure that it's not loose and wobbling all over the place, and then tie a knot on this end. And that will provide the spring force for both the trigger and for the catch, which is this here. So the knot will also just sit in that, or roughly on top of that little indent there. At this point, once this is assembled so far, we will then grab this piece right here and your trigger and put one of these small pins through this hole right here, through that, and that will be our pivot point for the trigger. You will then take 1/2 of your grip panel and put it on the side right here. You'll also put your trigger guard in, and then you will put 2 screws in. 1 screw here for the trigger guard, and 1 screw here for the grip. At this point, this black piece up here is also sitting in this groove right here. In the back here, there is a pin, which is right here. There is a little spacer looking thing. This is a printed version of it right here. In your kit, it's probably a white nylon thing. It's roughly this size. It fits in this hole in the sear, and that just goes in this hole right here. That is what the sear pivots on. At that point, you will then put on the other grip panel, making sure that the pin back here is aligned there, and that your trigger pin hasn't fallen out while you are handling everything. So make sure that the pin is still in there. Put on the other side, put in your 2 screws. Then your grip assembly is done. Next, during assembly, we're going to cover how to put together your plunger assembly. First, you're going to take your ram, which is this portion right here, and you're going to put an O-ring on the tip. This is a 016 or 016 O-ring, and that will go over the tip there and just sit there. Next, we're going to take the two parts of your plunger right here. These two parts are screwed together. However, in the middle, in this cavity right here, there is a 011 or 011 O-ring, which goes in there. It will just sit in there. You can tell it's the smallest O-ring in your kit. That will go in there. At that point, you then put the other half of the plunger on and screw it together with those three screws. Sorry. And then also put the 0123 O-ring on the end, or -123, sorry. The biggest O-ring that you have, right there, in this notch. And then if you have a plunger pad with your kit, which would be this piece right here, that would be adhesive, and that just sticks onto the front of the plunger, right there. At this point, we will assemble the T-pole. The T-pole is made out of two pieces, back half and front half. Take your back half, put one of the 1032 nuts back here, and then put on your front half and put in these two screws. Those will keep that nut trapped inside of the piece. You will then thread a threaded rod onto that and just put that on there until it stays in place. Overall, the assembly looks like this when cut in half. Going from back to front, you got your backmost piece right here, backmost bit of the T-pole. Got a nut, got the front half of the T-pole, you got the back of your top slide, then you have the rod cover. Your kit should have an aluminum rod cover. If it is not aluminum, it might cause issues. Kits might change in the future. If the kit has changed, I will put a update in the description or in the comments saying what that type of material has changed to. But right now, it should be an aluminum rod cover. Over top of the rod cover, you have the back cap, which is the back of your plunger tube assembly. You have your spring. You then have your plunger over top of the rod cover. And then on the end, you have your ram. Your ram will have a 1032 nut in the middle, as you can see there. You just drop that in through the front. So you'll take your nut and just drop it down this hole. Maybe hold it in place with a long screwdriver, but that's not necessarily required. Just put that on and then thread that on to the rest of the rod. You can do that by grabbing this front piece with one hand and this back piece with the other hand, just twisting in opposite directions to tighten it. It is very important that you have lubricated your rod cover as you put on the ram, or the plunger, sorry. So you will want to take this rod cover, this metal aluminum rod cover, and put some of the lubricant that came with your kit on the tip of it, and then you will want to put on your plunger. You can then also take a bit of lubricant and run it down the entire length of the rod cover, and then slide the plunger along it to spread out the lubricant. It is very important that this rod cover is lubricated so the plunger has a seal. At this point, you will also have one of the 123 O-rings here on the plunger, and one of them here on the ram. So there are two O-rings, one there and one there. At this point, your plunger assembly is finished. At this point, we are going to attach the front of your plunger tube and the grip, and attaching everything together into a solid assembly. This begins with your plunger tube, which will be a piece of hardware in your kit. You have started with this assembly right here. Take your plunger tube, put lubricant in it, and then slide it over all of the stuff that I had you previously assemble. You want to have enough lubricant in there to have all the parts go back and forth easily, but you don't want to have it absolutely dripping out everywhere. So I usually do one line all the way around the inside of the plunger tube. So I take my bottle of lubricant and just go whoop, one circle all the way around the edge, and then put in everything. At that point, we are then going to attach this front cover, this front cap. That just goes over the front of the plunger tube, right there. And then you will put in this top black bar, one screw in the front, one screw in the back. And then you will take your grip and put it in between the front cap and the back cap, right there. Just slide it in. Make sure that your trigger guard is going into this nice cavity in the front of the front cap. And then you will attach all of this stuff together with these 4 brackets on the side. Each bracket has 4 screws, so that is 16 screws total. And then you are done with this step. At this point, before you go any further, you'll want to test prime your blaster. At this point, there should be nothing flying apart if you try to prime it. So this is the correct time to test that it catches and that the trigger pull is of reasonable weight. So you will want to hold it by the grip down here and use the T-pole and just prime it back and then push it back forwards. Make sure that the prime is nice feeling, and then put your finger over the tip of this to make sure that you don't dry fire and damage components. Put your finger over the tip of the ram to block the air from coming out, and pull the trigger. If you are not able to have this catch, so if this is not grabbing onto the plunger assembly, you might have assembled something incorrectly. Please go back to the previous step and rewatch that and make sure that you did it to the letter. You might have also tied your elastic too loosely for your trigger and sear. The elastic goes through the grip, through the trigger, and through the top of the sear. You want to make sure that that is nice and tight to provide the spring force needed to catch the plunger as it comes back. As long as all of that is working correctly, we will move on. At this point, you will take your top slide, which is this portion right here, and slide it on from the front of the blaster. So you'll take it and slide it over all the components that we have assembled so far until it goes there to the back. You'll then put in these 4 screws in the back of the top slide. Right there, there, all these 4 screws. And that will keep the top slide attached to the bit that you pull back. We are now going to assemble the advancing mechanism for the clip. This is made out of 3 pieces, as you can see. There's this piece right here. This is the guide. There is this little cover that will keep in these pins. Then there is the arm itself. So you're going to take your guide, which is this piece. Make sure that there are no supports in it. This piece does print with supports, so there might be a support in between these 2 portions right here, or inside of this hole. Make sure that you have removed all of these supports. This prints on this face up here, so it would be more like this on the print bed. But we're going to assemble it like this. Make sure there are no supports. We are then going to take the arm right here and put it in. So that will look like this. Make sure that you can slide it in that gap right there easily. Slide it back and forth a bit. We are then going to put in these 2 top pins. Push them in until the heads are flush with this face right here. So they should extend a little bit out of there, but there shouldn't be a real big gap. So that right there is too much gap. You want to have it like that. At this point, you will also want to move the arm back and forth again to make sure that it is reasonably loose, that you can still push it back and forth relatively easily. And then you will put on this top cover. That will keep these pins in place. At this point, you will then attach this whole assembly that we have just created onto the rest of the blaster that you have so far. So that would be all of these portions right here. all of these portions. This goes on with the screws in the front that then attach to the front cap. So put in all these screws in the front to attach the clip mechanism to the rest of the blaster. You might need to bend out this rod a little bit in order to get it in the slot in the top slide. This little slot right here. You can also just take off the cover up here and take out one of the pins. And then once it is in the slot, then put back in the pin if you are having issues with that. At this point, the blaster is assembled. We are now going to go over how to assemble the clips. As you can see, this is the clip for the Thumper. This is a relatively simple clip to understand. It is modular, so you can extend it out as long as you want. There are ammo modules, which are these. You can combine multiple different ammo modules to have multiple different types of ammo inside of one clip, or you can have all the same ammo. It doesn't particularly matter. These are assembled with dovetails. There are dovetails, which are those, and they slide together. And then they are locked in place with screws. So to make a clip, you would take your two modules and slide them together. They slide on from the back. So you take it from the back and you push it on, like that. You would then put in the screws to lock it in place. Screw and screw. For the top cover, it is mostly the same, except that it slides on from the front. So this will slide on just like that. You then also put on these locking screws. When you are putting on the locking screws, you want to make sure that you are holding everything together so that it doesn't slide out a little bit before you put in the screw. That will cause issues. So what I like to do is I lie it up against a table, with the table against the front of the clip, and I push down on it to make sure that everything is nice and flat along the front face and nice and aligned. I then put in the screws to make sure that everything is together aligned without being slightly misaligned, and that would cause jamming issues if it is misaligned. So you want everything nice and square, and put in the screws to make sure that it's locked in place, and then you're good to go with your clip. At this point, your Thumper is fully finished. You can do some test firing, load in your clip from the top of the blaster. So that's all of these bits. And you just load it in from the front, or from the top onto there. You have to have the top slide fully back when you are putting in the clip. Once the clip is in, push forwards on the slide to get ready to fire. In order to unload your clip, if you have a captive version or half captive version, you need to pull it back most of the way and then push down from the top of the clip to push it out. You might need to pull back and forth on the top slide to advance the mechanism to let it out. It is not a super elegant system, but this isn't a super elegant blaster. So that's what you got to do. If you are having issues with the seal for this, in between the ram and the clips, which is this piece right here, you can apply lubricant to the tip. So put lubricant along this O-ring right here. And that will also help if the prime is not nice feeling. So whenever this is not lubricated on the tip, when you are beginning your prime, it will be very friction, or full friction, at the beginning of the prime because it is pulling the O-ring out of the clip. So if you want a slightly easier or nicer prime, lubricate that front O-ring. At this point, your Thumper is fully finished. Go out and enjoy it. Have some fun. All right. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or issues, put them in the comments below. If you have any troubleshooting issues or you want more information on the Thumper, click the link in the description. All right. Thank you for watching.